Welcome to the Ritual Disc Flip podcast. I am your host, Chris Nays. If this is your first time, I am a music lover from St. Louis, Missouri. I like to bring guests on my show most of the time, and we discuss albums, live shows, all kinds of stuff relating to the world of rock and roll and heavy metal, and, you know, possibly in the future branching out to rap and stuff like that. We haven't got there yet, but, you know, all in due time. Today, we are going to be discussing two albums, which is the first time I've ever done this, and at the request of my guest, I felt like it was the right thing for us to do. And without further ado, let me introduce my guest. His name is Simon Koch. Simon, how are you doing this morning?
Oh, not too bad, buddy. Just got a few cups of coffee in me. I've been looking forward to this. I've never been on a podcast before, and I know you and I don't necessarily know each other too well, but we have, run into one another a few times throughout the past couple of years, and we've never had any issues. We've always kind of seen eye to eye on a lot of things, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm glad to have you on the show. I guess we should give a little bit of background. I, of course, played in bands forever here in St. Louis, and you also did the same thing. And then, of course, you're a rock and roller, so we run into each other at shows all the time. And like you said, always cordial, never any issue between us, and that's how I like it. Especially with being fellow showgoers, it's just the best when you meet people who have similar interests and just everything is fine. You know what I mean? Like, any kind of drama in the scene is always kind of like, oh God, here we go.
Oh yeah.
So,
yeah, they love their drama.
Yeah, exactly. And we've kind of like texted back and forth a little bit here and there on random subjects. You know what I mean? And this show is all about connecting with other people through rock and roll in its various forms. So I feel like we're going to get to know each other and how we feel about this music very well over the course of the next couple hours. So,
I agree.
Yeah, and we haven't even mentioned the albums that we're going to cover. It's Led Zeppelin 1 and 2. They stand pretty high in rock and roll history, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I would say they top 10, most influential albums really when it comes to rock and roll. It was at the dawn of this genre, so to speak, the peak, critical time, 1969. They both came out in 1969, which is unique, for a rising artist to release two albums within the same year. Which, you could say that almost both those albums could be made into one. They're very similar in a lot of aspects, but I'm pretty sure they wrote all of those songs and simply divided it, if I'm not mistaken.
That it wouldn't surprise me at all. Like you said, they're very similar sounding and in structure and that kind of thing. They're of the same sort of mode, so I think that it's a very high possibility this stuff was all sort of jammed out and written around the same time. But before we get into the records, let's sort of give people a background on you so that kind of they know what your perspective is and where you come from, that sort of thing. So let's sort of set a baseline. Tell the audience, how old you are, where you're from, and sort of growing up, who was your influence that led you to this music, or what was your influence that led you to this music?
Oh, sure. All right, so I grew up in the Boot Heel of Missouri, or Missouri, if you want to say it that way.
Sure.
I kind of go back and forth, depending on present company. So I grew up in Sykeston, and after high school, I moved up to Cape Girardeau, and then I was in the Boot Heel for a while. And then, of course, on the weekends, I was always at our family property out in the country. Then around, I believe it was 2013, I moved up to St. Louis, and I was up there for a number of years, 5 or so. Yeah, I've played in a few bands. In Cape Girardeau, I had a death metal band called Regulator, and we actually got that name from an old clock. There's an old clock called Regulator. My bassist and good friend Rash at the time thought of that name. We thought it was fitting, because, time is the ultimate regulator. We only have so long. So very fitting for death metal. Let's see. All right, so around 2013, I met up with my friend Nizam and a few other buddies, and we started In Flesh. That was like a death black band, and it was short-lived, but we had some good songs, had a good time. But concerning my gateway into rock and roll, if you will, Zeppelin was key. Zeppelin was critical. Without a doubt, it was my favorite band. And, well, it still is my favorite band, but that was it from the start, that I was hooked immediately. I'd never heard anything like that. Jimmy Page's guitar simply blew me away. Specifically those first 2 albums, of course. But yeah, I guess I got a lot of influence from my dad and what he listened to. A lot of late 60s, early 70s rock and roll. But I listened to everything myself, anything from classical to blues to jazz to metal to rap, even old school rap, preferably. Big band and swing. I mean, you name it. I'm probably listening to it. Country as well, depending on who the artist is. Bluegrass, for sure. But, yeah, back to rock and roll. I think the first song I ever heard was actually No One By You by the Scorpions, which, that's on the radio constantly.
Sure, yeah.
Because they loop the same songs over and over. But still, it's a badass song. And that was probably the song that did it all for me, that when I heard that song, I was like, that's it. This is me. That's what I'm about. But when it comes to my favorite band, the first band that hooked me, it was definitely Zeppelin.
Yeah, and it makes sense because it sounds like you have a pretty eclectic background of influences and stuff that you like musically. So Led Zeppelin covers a lot of ground, and you can even see just from these 2 records, they are doing a lot of things. So that pulls in, the blues side, that pulls in the psychedelic side, and then the heavy metal side. It's like a bunch of things are happening, and all of it is like, wow, this is different,
Definitely. Yeah, Page had a lot of influences for sure. I'm also a big fan of psych rock. Definitely.
Yeah, I kind of didn't really discover Zeppelin. Like, I heard of it, of course, because growing up in St. Louis, KG is pretty much always on. It's just around, you're driving in a car, you're in the garage or whatever you're doing, rock and roll was around, and that has sort of changed over the years. Like, of course, people still listen to music on the radio, but like, I just remember growing up, music was just on all the time. So, of course, I heard Zeppelin, but then when I actually took the initiative to dive in, that's sort of when I discovered the music of these records and some of the later stuff, too. And, I had a friend who had a T-shirt of the first record album cover, the, of course, iconic Hindenburg photo, and he liked them a lot, and he was an influence on me, showing me different albums and eras of their material. So of course, same sort of deal. Like I heard it and fell in love with what Jimmy Page was doing, and of course, being a drummer, like you can't not love John Bonham as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, absolutely.
They just do the thing that they do very well, and if you're into music, if you're passionate about music, Zeppelin is a very attractive band.
Are you aware of the roots of Zeppelin, like the band that was before them,
Yeah, I'm
the Yardbirds?
right. Yeah, like in preparation for this, we're gonna get into a little bit of history, some facts that I pulled, but like I still don't. I have not really dove into Yardbirds that much. I know of them. That's a thing that I need to do for sure. But sort of my influences from around this time sort of almost exclusively lie in Zeppelin and Jimmy Page, and a little bit of Who. You know what I mean? And that's kind of it.
Hmm.
Um, is there what would be some recommended listening just while we're on this topic?
But are you referring to like '69 in general, or
Oh
like
yeah,
the
just
late '60s,
uh,
'70s, or?
sort of Yardbirds or any kind of bands around that time that I would not have heard of, or albums that are essential listening for people that are listening to this.
Oh goodness, we could have a whole podcast on that.
Yeah,
I'm
you're
not,
right.
I'm not entirely sure that we even want to go down that route. We could list albums, and the Yardbirds were great because at one point you actually had Jeff Beck in it as well as Eric Clapton. I forget which order it was. I'm not sure if Eric Clapton was in it first and then Jeff Beck or vice versa, but the last guitarist to enter was Jimmy Page. And then Jimmy Page kind of took over, so to speak. And who did he know? Page knew John Paul Jones, I believe. And then they met up with Robert Plant, and Robert Plant knew Bonham. I believe that's how it went.
Yeah,
Um,
let's while we're here, let me just list off these things that I pulled, and we'll get a really nice, clear idea of what the history was of this pulling together before LZ1. So, um, here we go. So, 1966, Page becomes an accomplished session guitarist in the UK. He at first plays bass in the Yardbirds, switches to guitar, which creates the dual lineup with him and Beck. So I think Clapton was earlier.
yeah, I think you're right.
And
Yeah.
then, so Beck leaves in October of '66, and the Yardbirds sort of wind down, and Page considers starting a supergroup with members of The Who. But it never really materializes into anything more than just jamming a little bit. Uh, John Paul Jones records Beck's Bolero with Page, Beck, and Keith Moon. So that's sort of the extent of where that went with people in Led Zeppelin. Then in July of '68, so they're jamming and sort of like recording a little bit of stuff here and there. But in July of '68, Plant joins the remaining Yardbirds. Page and bassist Chris Deja, or Deja, I don't know how to pronounce that. But anyway, recruits John Bonham from former Plant band Band of Joy. The former bass player quits. John Paul Jones takes his place. New Yardbirds play Scandinavian gigs in September of that year. The former bass player Chris sues to change the name of the Yardbirds, and Keith Moon coins the new name Led Zeppelin. And then very shortly after that, in November, Peter Grant secures a contract with Atlantic for the band. Sort of signed sight unseen for the biggest advance of any band ever at the time. And the band is given complete autonomy when they release albums, when they tour, and final say over the content and design, which sort of sets the stage for what this band is going to be. Their entire concept and everything is controlled by them, which ends up making them one of the most unique bands projects at the time, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So that gives you a sort of idea lead up to what became Led Zeppelin. And then let's sort of intro Led Zeppelin 1 with a few facts here. Of course, it's their debut as Led Zeppelin, released in January of '69, as we sort of touched on a little bit earlier. March 31st in the UK. So there's a few months in between, which I don't know why that was, but maybe it was just different contracts for different companies releasing it, right?
Yeah, I know whenever they got on the scene, the biggest band at the time was still the Beatles. They had the biggest crowds, biggest shows, and all that. And then when Zeppelin got into the scene, they simply took over. It was kind of, we're in charge now. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe even until this day, the largest show in rock and roll history, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was in Tampa, Florida. And it was Zeppelin. I could be wrong, but I don't know. I think I'm right on that. I'm still pretty sure today Zeppelin holds like the record for the largest crowd in a venue.
Yeah, as far as like inside a venue, that is probably correct. You know what? Like on the show, sometimes when we don't know, we just like to say that's a fact. So, even if it
Yeah, we can get away
actually,
with it, right?
even if it's like specifically incorrect, we're gonna say that it is absolutely correct. Uh, so that is a fact. I don't know if you listen to
Yeah, it's just us, right? Who's going to challenge us?
yeah,
We
well,
make up his.
until they do, we're correct. So, um, first fact of the episode has been laid down. Okay, so recorded September and October of '68. Very quickly, Olympic Studios in London in 36 hours. Let's see, page produced with no record deal. And I was gonna pull out both of the vinyl of 1 and 2 because we're gonna cover both today. I discovered today that I don't have one, which I was like flabbergasted. I looked through the rest of my records, seeing if maybe I misplaced it or something. I don't have it, so I don't know what the hell happened there.
Oh man, we got to postpone this. We
Yeah,
got to pause. You got to run out and buy it right now.
you know, what's crazy is here's a little tidbit story. I happened upon almost the entire run through of Led Zeppelin's discography on vinyl at Goodwill one day, and it was like a stack of somebody's entire collection. It was crazy. Apparently, it was with the exception of one, but
Goodwill, huh?
yeah, and they
I,
were a
I like
core.
that. I like that somebody went to Goodwill and they're like, you know what? You don't need clothes. All you need's these Zeppelin records. So
Well, I happened upon them for a quarter a piece, and they were so pristine. It's the only time in history that's probably ever happened to somebody. So, um, very stoked on that. But I obviously have some shopping to do soon. The album cover, of course, without even looking at it, is the Hindenburg disaster photo. And, you know, this vinyl comes in many forms, of course. As far as like some of them are gatefold, some are not. But it's obviously iconic. Do you have any thoughts on the album cover itself?
I'm not too aware as to why they chose that image, but I do know, and maybe this has something to do with it, that you mentioned Keith Moon before of The Who,
Mm-hmm.
and rumor has it that he sort of gave them the name Led Zeppelin because he was being interviewed, I believe, I forget by who. It's been a while since I've read up on this, but and basically Keith Moon was referring to Zeppelin and how big they were going to be, and quote unquote, it was something along the lines of, oh, they're going to light up like a hot air balloon.
Right.
This band's going to be so big that they're going to, light up like a hot air balloon. That may have something to do with it. Could be wrong, but like you said, we make up our own facts here. So
Yes, we do. No, I've heard a very similar story in the sort of uh, storied history of this band. Things just sort of come and go in your mind from like before I did research for this, I kind of just sort of knew this stuff. However, I knew it, whether it be from my dad talking about the band or whatever. But it's cool that Keith Moon is so intertwined with their history because he's also obviously renowned for his drumming ability. And these bands literally hung out and jammed together in the scene back in the day. So you gotta love that.
oh, absolutely. And I feel like knowing the roots and history of bands and rock and roll in general is equivalent to the music itself. I know that you enjoyed the roots and the history, and I do as well. And I feel like most rock and rollers do as well. You dive into it. You want to know more about it. It's fascinating, really.
Yeah, it's part of being passionate about the music itself is wanting to know more. You actually are on the quest to know everything you can possible about some of this stuff. So that's why many books have been written about this band, and every band that is legendary from this time. So anyway, back to Led Zeppelin 1. It was a huge commercial success in the US and the UK. The album has been certified 8 times platinum in the US alone. And we only get one single from this record, though, because legendarily, their manager, Peter Grant, was very against releasing singles. Which...
Did not know that.
I think that has to do with their artistic sort of approach, their integrity with this music is like they wanted people to listen to it as an album in its full form,
Right.
and not split up into tiny bits like the radio and like media like to do. They would rather be in bite-sized form. With edited down material and with basically with zero integrity.
Yeah, that's when concept albums were really taking off. Like your Pink Floyd, your Moody Blues, and what have you.
Yeah, they called it art rock at the time. That has really that term has sort of gone away over the years because it's maybe a little like seen as like hoity-toity or whatever. It just sounds weird, and obviously
perhaps.
Yes, and I think like over the years we just get more and more granular about how we refer to bands. For instance, the cores, the hardcore, the post-rock, you can split up genres into a million different smaller terms, right?
Oh yeah, especially within metal.
Oh, certainly. Death metal, your deathcore, your everything. So
yeah, it's point of absurdity.
Sure, yeah. So, anyway, let's. If you're ready to, unless you have any other random stuff in your memory from about this album overall that you want to mention, we can get to the tracklist breakdown. And on side A, of course, we start with Good Times, Bad Times. It's their introduction to the world for all intents and purposes. What are your thoughts on this song?
I would say that Good Times, Bad Times still today is one of the heaviest hitting rock and roll songs ever because it's short, it's to the point, it's like 2 minutes and 40 seconds or 2:45 or something like that. I mean, it's heavy hitting. The guitar solo is killer. Yeah, it's just straight and to the point. I don't think people were ready for that, to hear something just so in your face.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a really good foot in the door. Like you said, it's like kind of short, pretty catchy chorus in there, and you immediately get a sense of where they're going sonically. There's very interesting placement of the sounds in the mix, guitar overdubs, and you get the kick drum flashiness. His Bonham is infamous for the speed of his right foot. No double bass kick needed. In fact, he tried out using double kick for a little while, and they decided to nix it because he was just too busy with it. Um, so I don't know that happened necessarily on this album, but I know he definitely had experimented with it. Um, and yeah, you immediately sort of hear sonically the use of the ambient sound using the room mics and reverb generously. So I think that lends to the heaviness, like you said, of this song.
And the
And
production as well, you know,
sure,
like when you compare it to other albums in '69. What's a good like comparison I could make? It's almost like death metal, in the '80s was kind of gritty and underproduced, which is how I like it preferably. But it wasn't until Death's Leprosy came out with such clean production and hard hitting that everybody was heading on down to Florida to Morrisound Studios and wanted to make their music sound as polished and as clear as that. And I feel like it's a equal comparison with this album. Like this first album was so clear, but also so heavy and in your face that, it was, there's not much could compare with it.
yeah, totally. So I'm gonna be throwing in clips, of course. And I've prepared for this one. It's the ending segment of the song with the example of the kick drum use and lots of overdubbing guitars. So let's listen to that. Okay, so that's you're hearing there. There's a lot going on. It's moving around in the mix. There's a lot of Jimmy Page is just like doing his best material he's probably ever done in his career, and they're making a statement immediately, like, okay, this is going to be like something like we mentioned that you've never heard before. And I think you're right. From the bat, it leveled everybody.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Page was way ahead of his time too, and he was the mastermind really behind the whole band. Each member brought their own unique sound, and it wouldn't be Led Zeppelin without each individual member. But of course, and he would agree that Page was he was the leader, so to speak, the mastermind.
For sure, and he produced this himself, so he has a lot. He has a very clear vision of what he wants out of this. Well, I guess let's move on to the second song on side A. Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. This
Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. Yeah, so like what Zeppelin did with a lot of artists is, they're just like, right, I'm just going to take this song and twist it and use it for myself, and make something out of it, which is fine. That's what a lot of artists do, but it's like they don't even let people know. Who was it? It was an American folk singer, Anne Brendan, I believe, in the 50s. And, she didn't even find out until the 80s that, they took this song.
Yeah,
but then she agreed to split royalties with them.
It's really interesting how they were able to pull that off. It's like um, I don't know. It's like they made a decision to just ignore
It's like,
that fact for a
yeah, it's like
while.
this
I
is
don't
my
know.
song now. Yeah.
It's yeah, it's when you look back on it now, it's like, yeah, it makes you feel uncomfortable because like they truly did make these songs their own. But at the same time, like, they would not have sounded this way without this particular group of musicians playing them. Um, but
And the songs are basically totally different. They may just have the same name or a similar rhythm, but aside from that, they're different songs. So I don't really see what the big deal is.
yeah, you sort of ride that line between being heavily influenced by an arrangement and taking it, right? So with that in mind, we're just going to judge the songs for what they are as we hear them on this album, right? So yeah, here's my sort of take on this one. I love the opening guitar sound and just the melody and everything. It's beautiful. I think overall this song is epic. It's a great example of room sound again. Uh, and, we get some really cool panned guitars and vocal stuff on this song as well. Actually, I want to really quickly include a small example of the vocal bleed through, um, which is a thing that happened on 1 and 2, where um, I believe this is what happened, is that they recorded at the vocals at such a high level on tape that it bled through on the master recording, so they were unable to edit it out, and they had to either just add a bunch of reverb to it or use studio tricks to make it seem like it was on purpose, but it definitely wasn't. So one example of that is on this song, and you hear it during I believe it's you hear him saying "Hear it calling me," and I think it's during for the either the first or the second verse. But anyway, here's a small clip of that. Okay, so there's that, and um, I also included. I wanted to mention Plant originally sang heavy throughout the song, and then they decided to change it. So that's an interesting tidbit from the recording process. Yeah, so he decided to go more dynamic with it, which I think was absolutely the right approach.
Well, you know more about that song than I do. I was unaware of that. That's cool.
Yeah, really I just found out this stuff through research, so it's not like I necessarily knew it before I enlightened myself. Um, and then also, let's see, at the ending, when I was listening to this, I heard something for the first time. Actually, today was this really buried, barely audible guitar at the very end. I don't have a clip of that, but
I know what you're referring to, though.
yeah, it's just really cool. Like so many years of listening to this stuff, if I really zone in on it, you can still hear new things buried in there. And then the clip that I prepared of this song is well, actually, give me sort of your thoughts on this song overall before I play the clip.
We're still on Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I knew you played one clip before. I think it's still one of the most beautiful acoustic songs there is, really. And it's still heavy hitting too. When the chorus picks up and kicks off, I mean, they can. It's like a composer. They can make it sound any way they want to. It'll, it'll make them. What's up? Oh, my dad's over there wheezing.
He's fine.
I had to make sure it wasn't croaking and on the floor.
I'm glad that you are you have your family's health in mind while we do this.
Oh yeah, my dad's here and my sister's here, and
We're all here.
they're over here whispering things and poking fun.
Hey guys.
Anyway, yeah. Where was I at? Yeah, so I still think it's one of the most beautiful acoustic rock and roll songs there is, and the song can make you cry, and then a few seconds later, you're ready to headbang, with the chorus. Very unique.
Exactly. Yeah, this song has a really nice few moments where it really kicks in, and it, like I said, they're doing a lot of things on this record. So anyway, the clip that I prepared is of the example of panned guitars and the vocal overdubs, sort of the droning O moments that Robert Plant is pretty famous for, especially from these records. It seemingly is improv, and I know he throughout the years live would improv a lot of stuff, and they would just go, and they would have. I believe the live version that I found online of this was like 12 minutes long or something. So they're unafraid of doing stuff like that and experimenting. Here's a clip of that.
Really good. You made me happy every single day. But now I've got to go
away. Okay, so let's move on to You Shook Me. I believe this is another borrowed song, correct?
It is, and I have that here. Who was that? Got that wrote down somewhere. I'll find that as we discuss it.
It's a Willie Dixon. I have it written down here.
Is it Willie Dixon?
Yes. Yeah, there's actually a couple of his are on this album.
Yeah, there's a few Willie Dixons because A Whole Lot of Love, even though it's on the second album, which was sung by Muddy Waters, that was originally a Willie Dixon as well. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, so give me sort of your overall thoughts on this one.
This is one of my favorites, actually. In the middle of the song, where you have three solos back to back. It starts out with Plant on the harp, and then moves over to John Paul Jones on keys, and then, of course, Jimmy Page wraps it up on a guitar. The transition and the flow of it is flawless, really. It's I used to jam to that one a lot growing up. At one point, I knew every single Led Zeppelin song there was on guitar, solos and all. I don't now, but I'm sure if I revisited it, I could do it again. But yeah, this was always one of my favorites to jam to.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective on. I honestly, like, even on re-listening this, I think for just like personal taste, it goes a little too far into the slow bluesy sort of zone for me. And I just want to make sure I give my take and don't just agree with everything. I think is just a taste thing. I think it sort of slows the pace of the record where we've gone so far with the first two songs. It is a whole different thing, and that's also a plus, though, that they're moving into different areas. So just because it's not for me doesn't mean it's not for the world.
Yeah, well, I can agree with that a bit because A few songs later, they have "I Can't Quit You, Babe," another blues track that they stole.
Yeah, from
And so you
Willie
have
Willie Dixon
two
again.
long blues tracks, on a more so heavy hitting album. So I can agree with your perspective there.
At least they're split onto the two different sides, so there's that.
That's
Another fact I had about this song is Jeff Beck was unhappy with Led Zeppelin copying his arrangement of it. So apparently they didn't just take it from Willie Dixon. They literally stole the entire arrangement from Jeff Beck's version of it. So again, they're sort of...
No wonder they're the biggest band in the world. They've stolen everything.
At least like early on, they were pretty notorious for that, and then even on some of the later records, they did it too. So anyway, the clip that I brought for this one is an example of the sort of backwards echo effect near the end of the song, which I really like. It's sort of a psychedelic thing they tack on at the end. Okay, so let's move on to Days of Confused. Obviously, Days of Confused is renowned by fans and non-fans. It's just a song that became bigger almost than the band itself. I think like anytime you hear people talking about Led Zeppelin, Days of Confused comes up, which, I don't necessarily always like their live versions of it. I think that the album version is better than any. Yeah, no, I think because they would go on these 30-minute dirges sometimes, and like some of them I like, but other ones I don't. So it is what it is. But I feel like the album version of this is the best sort of encapsulation of what they were trying to do.
Ultimately, I agree with you there, especially the solo. It's one of the best rock and roll solos of all time. It's perfect.
Agreed.
But I still love the live versions because, well, especially when Page gets out his wand, he's actually performing ritual magic on the crowd, but not a lot of people know that. So I like it.
Hold on. I like that. Go into that a little bit. Do you know more about that?
Yeah, and so essentially whenever he's getting into all the crazy effects and it's real silent and eerie sounding, and he was the first to do this because, he was, as many people know, he was obsessed with the occult and Aleister Crowley. He even bought Aleister Crowley's mansion in Scotland, which I believe is burned down now, if I'm not mistaken. But
really?
Yeah. So, what he's doing there, it's actually a ritual. He's hypnotizing the crowd, so to speak. And if you have that DVD with, I forget the name of it, but it's the double disc DVD with the desert on the front. It's all their lives. There's one particular, I think it's on the first disc. It's one particular show where he'll hit his guitar with the wand, wave it in front of him, wave it to the left of him, wave it to the right, wave it behind him. And that is an ode to the four winds. And, so a lot of Luciferian magic going on.
That's really interesting, Simon. I had no idea I was being hypnotized when I watched that, but I know the exact movement you're talking about. Of course, he would do that at every single show. Yeah, no, I like it's interesting to have a new perspective on what they're doing with that cuz like if you don't know sort of the background of it and why it's interesting, then you can sort of just be like, well, okay, this isn't really the song anymore. This is this is him just making weird sounds. So now as a prog fan, like I can dig that too sometimes. It's just when I listen to this record, I like that version so much more that I'm always gonna think about it while they're going on for 30 minutes, right?
Right.
It looks like that DVD we were talking about doesn't even have a title really. It just says Led Zeppelin DVD. That's it. So,
Enough said, right?
yeah, exactly. Very easily found if you want to check out that footage on YouTube. Of Dazed and Confused, of course. But let's see, what do I have written down here? Jake Holmes originally wrote this in 1967, apparently. So this is another sort of borrowed material. Not the entire thing, of course, because they absolutely made it their own. But it should be noted that Jake Holmes wrote this, or at least an early version of it.
Right.
We get more vocal bleed through in the middle section of this, the psychedelic sort of section. I really like that the drum fills are sort of placed in an interesting spot in this song. They're not always necessarily at the end of the fourth bar of every sort of section. It makes it loose feeling. And then that transfers, of course, to when they improv live. Very cool. So some of John Bonham's best stuff is in this song.
Without.
And also, in preparation for this, I was sort of trolling around YouTube and found an early version of this. With it's not Plant on vocals. I don't really know who is on vocals, and it has different lyrics in the verses and stuff. Similar arrangement though, and they added some extra instrumentation and stuff in there. So it's worth looking for. Just search early demos Led Zeppelin, and it'll be like the first thing that comes up.
Yeah, I know that Plant wasn't Page's first choice of a vocalist. I forget who recommended Plant, but yeah, there were a few people that tried out before him.
Right. Yeah, so I guess the clip that I brought is sort of the last bit of the solo back into the chorus, and then we get the build to the climax of the song. So I included a hefty clip for this part.
Sure.
Understandably so, because this song is so good. guess move on to side 2. We flip the record, and we're on track 5 with Your Time Is Gonna Come. Give me your thoughts on this one, Simon.
Your Time Is Gonna Come. It's probably the most unique song on this album, I would say. It definitely fits because it's them, but you could almost take it out and it would still be a good album without it. I feel like this song could almost go on Zeppelin 3, but
yeah, I totally agree with that.
It's probably my least favorite song on this album. I mean, I dig it for sure. I mean, I dig most Zeppelin, but yeah, it's definitely the most unique, I would say. Kind of stands out.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because this would be one of my favorites on it. Top 3 probably. I love just the different things that go on in this. The opening organ solo is like pure magic to me. I still get goosebumps sometimes listening to it. John Paul Jones, of course, playing that. Really simple arrangement in this tune. I just kind of love everything about it. The slide guitar, the vocals, and then how it just sort of slides right into the next instrumental track is great.
Black Mountain Side. Yeah.
Right, and like you said, like it does sort of stick. Your Time Is Gonna Come just sticks out as being unique and a really cool way to start the second side. And of course, I think the standout part of the song and what makes it really unique is the opening organ. So that, I think, is what I included as a clip here. So we are back. Unless you have anything further to say about that one, we can move on.
We can move on. Otherwise, we're going to be here all day.
Well, we're already we're on track for a couple of hours, so yeah, might as well. Black Mountain Side. I don't know about you, but I absolutely love Black Mountain Side. Again, I think it's a total standout track. We have a guest musician on this playing the tabla drum, Viram Jasani. I don't know who that is or what his background is at all, but I just saw that in the liner notes. I
think the song is perfect, especially for a build-up for, communication breakdown, which comes up next. It's totally drastic, So it's like you're not even expecting communication breakdown to come after that. You've been in the groove of Your Time Is Gonna Come, and Black Mountain Side, almost a trance, if you will, which they're fantastic at. Black Mountain Side is beautiful for sure. It's definitely fitting for this album. But yeah, the first time I heard it, I did not expect communication breakdown to come after it. But yeah.
Yeah, no, they kind of, in a strange way, they sort of go together because they're so completely opposite. It's an awesome thing. What's cool that I really love about Black Mountain Side and what makes it so unique on this record and in rock and roll sort of in general is that it has a very Eastern quality to it. I think that has a lot to do with Jasani's contribution, the sort of accenting every third note, which is a thing that they do in Indian style music, and the guitar playing paired with that, accenting every third note of the structure of the song. It absolutely, they pair well together, and it lifts the entire arrangement above what it would be if they were separate. So this is an
And
absolute.
it's short.
Say that
It's only a little. It's short too. It's only a little bit past 2 minutes, which is nice.
Yeah,
It's like this
they don't go
like a perfect
on.
interlude.
They don't go on too long with it as well. You're right. So all of those things combined make it really nice. Let's see here. I actually didn't write in my notes if I have a clip for that. So if I do, here it is. Okay, so on to communication breakdown. Give your generals on this one.
I would say it's one of the first heavy metal songs, actually.
Yeah,
You know,
I totally agree.
I don't believe anybody was, doing the very fast downward picks like that before this song. I'm not aware of. Maybe a few, recluse like psych rock bands that nobody had heard of, but for the general public, this was a new thing. Nothing was that fast. I remember the first time I heard it when I was a kid. That it blew me away. I'd never heard anything so fast like that, and so in your face.
Yeah, upon further analyzation of this, like, I'd never really thought of it as almost a proto-punk rock song, but it kind of is. If there wasn't a excellent guitar solo on it, I would say that it is like
Punk song.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like
I could agree with that. Yeah.
it's super close to something like the Ramones would play, honestly. Like, it's not that far away from it. If you take away the vocals, and just put a straight ahead sort of melody on the vocals, could be a Ramones song. So yeah, fairly simple, built around the page riff, and it's another staple that they would play for shows throughout their career. So I feel like
It's kind of on par with Good Times, Bad Times,
Yeah, I feel like if you're gonna like talk about Led Zeppelin songs that people must hear, this would certainly be one of them.
It's definitely one of the more popular ones.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily put it on. Like, I'm sort of my zone of Led Zeppelin. While I love 1 and 2, and I will forever. Like, my sort of zone of Led Zeppelin is a little bit later than that. And I think a lot of that has to do with growing up watching Song Remains the Same. They play a lot more of their sort of middle days material. My favorite song of theirs is The Ocean, which I found out a fact about today that I never knew that you can hear a telephone buried in there somewhere. Had zero idea. But, that's sort of more my Zeppelin zone. But anyway, yeah, the clip that I prepared for communication is the vocal thing into the guitar solo that goes to the end of the song. So I should mention that I think Plant really stands out on this one, and he makes this song sort of he makes this raise higher than it would normally be. Okay, moving on to "I Can't Quit You, Baby." Another Willie
Another
Dixon.
Willie Dixon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
uh, must be
Led
mentioned.
Zeppelin, also known as Willie Dixon 2.
Right. Yeah, in this song you get this sort of call and response between Page and Plant doing each of their separate things. I think that that's pretty superbly done in this one, with some pretty tasteful drum fills by John Bonham. Again, we're in the sort of blues zone, so like it's not really my favorite. It would be in the lower half of songs that I like in this, but
I would agree with that. Like, I'm a huge blues fan. I prefer my blues to be Delta blues, and kind of low quality, and I like the guitar playing to be kind of shitty. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Like, I want it to sound like actual Delta blues, and lonesome and cold and kind of evil sounding. But yeah, this one's, I can agree with that. It does drag on a little bit, but I still love it.
I feel like when they sort of go into blues area, they come across as covers to me more than their own thing. So that might be what it is. Like, I want Zeppelin instead of just a sort of blatantly copied blues song.
Yeah, they had a few of those, which, like you said, this was a Willie Dixon song, and but it was first made popular by Otis Rush.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
He
that.
was a Chicago band. Yeah, 1956. Otis Rush. Yeah, he's the one that made it popular, and then Zeppelin took it from them.
I think a lot of these UK bands around the time were super influenced by American blues artists. So, while that's the thing we were talking about earlier, is like writing that line between showing your influence and just blatantly doing with their material. It makes me like it less, honestly, but it is what it is. Yeah, and there, I don't have really much more to say about it unless you do.
Kind of on the same page there.
All right, the same Jimmy Page, would you say? Sorry.
No, I said we're on the same page there.
Yeah, no, I made a dad joke and it didn't go well, so we're just move on.
Oh,
Yeah.
Said you messed up my happy home. Made me mistreat my only child. Said you know I love you, baby. My love for you I could never hide.
To how many more times? What's your thoughts on the closing track of this record?
Oh, it's perfect. Yeah, I would say it's equivalent to Dazed and Confused. Excellent solo, excellent drum work. I forget who they took this one from, but they definitely made it their own.
Yeah, I didn't see any artist referenced for this one, so it might be theirs. It's hard to say, really, because like some of them might just be undiscovered as of yet, whether they took them or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is one of my favorites off that album for sure.
Oh, totally. It's a definite standout. It actually was their closing number for many of their opening tours. So, and rightfully so. It's that good.
The Wolf. That's who they took it from. Howlin' Wolf.
Oh, okay.
Pretty sure. Yeah, Howlin' Wolf.
I'll be damned. Zeppelin, what the hell? What if what if like this was the groundbreaking podcast that was we were the first people to call them out? Wouldn't that be
Yeah,
something?
we'd be rich.
I mean, we'd have to figure out some kind of scheme, just like they did to profit over calling them out. Um,
Old Led
anyway,
Zeppelin wrote a
yeah.
song in their life.
Yeah, so this song features very cool guitar stuff. The riff is totally memorable. You got your weird psychedelic section in the middle too, which they obviously used to great effect live, very much like Dazed. Um, and then the clip that I pulled, which I'm going to play now, is this sort of Oh Rosie Robert Plant section where Bonham goes into maybe the best drum groove of the entire record, in my opinion. It's a very simple sort of thing on the snare, but it makes you sort of see the riff and the beat from a whole other side. Like he sort of flips it around completely. So let's play that really quickly.
Oh, Rosie, oh, girl. Oh, Rosie, oh, yeah. Steal away now, steal away, baby, steal away. Little Robert Anthony wants to come and play. Why don't you come with me, baby? Steal away. All right, they call me the hunter. That's my name. Call me the hunter. That's how I got my fame. Ain't no need to hide. Ain't no need to run. 'Cause I got you in the sight of my
It's like if I hear that, I want to get up and headbang or whatever whatever you do to this music. I'll never know what it's like to see this stuff live. Like, you go you see whoever. Celebration Day is the best example we have in St. Louis of a band that can pull off this stuff live, but like it's never really the same. Even if they play with the same equipment and all that stuff, you can do that forever and you'll never quite reach the level of what this band was like live. So anyway, I love that part of the song. I think it raises it even higher. If you thought it couldn't go higher, it goes even further. They somehow dig deeper and further in, even to the very last moments of this record. So,
Well, it has a bit of everything in it. It has the heaviness and speed, which you were referring to, but also the psychedelic middle part. Excellent solo. Like I agree that this would be the best drum work out of all the songs. Well, yeah, I can say that. Yeah, the best drum work out of all the songs. I'm not a drummer, but I mean, you are, so you know better than I do.
no, yeah, it is. It is for sure. We can say that as a fact. Yeah, and even like
we make up the rules here.
That's
we'll
right,
tell
we
you
do.
what the facts are.
And like I said, all the way till the end, they're doing interesting stuff. And actually, you can hear the primitive version of how they would move the sounds left to right in the mix at the very end, which like it sort of is weird. It's headphone ear candy, which was always for me the best way to listen to this. Was either on a road trip in my car or Jeep or whatever, or totally engrossed in over-the-ear headphones and just like in the zone, right? And you can hear them literally moving the knobs back and forth from left to right, which is always cool to hear that on classic records like this or some of the Black Sabbath records. They do it a lot. I just really like that.
I used to have a pair of those noise canceling headphones by Bose. Those were really nice, and so I'd always do the same when I was laying down at night. I'd put on a record, which Zeppelin was usually a go-to, and this song in particular. So I'd always zone out to it, and just fall asleep to all the psychedelic chaos.
Yeah, I don't know. We should actually mention this for. I'll be forward and upfront with my experience with this, but I will say that these records definitely stand up to the green test. And if people can't read between the lines of that one, that's fine. But to this day, if I indulge in a little bit of marijuana use, it makes little ear candy stuff like that even better. So there's that. And of course, like, this band is synonymous with that stuff becoming prominent around that time, right? So it's no surprise that they go together.
And Page was, as I said, he's all about entering, your third eye, if you will, which can be dangerous.
Oh, but, absolutely. You can definitely go too far.
Yeah, he's a big drug promoter. I'll say that.
I think that they maybe you can touch a little bit on this, but I think that they, because of his dabbling in the dark arts and stuff like that, that they kind of get a little bit of flack for that. I don't know if you've seen that or not, but like I feel like because he went into that side of things and used that sort of dark imagery and that and symbolism on their album covers and stuff like that, that people were sort of wary of their of whatever all of that stuff is, right?
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of people still don't even know. I would say they're subtly the most satanic band that there is, really, and they do it perfectly because a lot of people don't even know. They sneak it into their lyrics. They sneak it into their stage performances, which they're under the Crowley Thelema or Thelema, however you want to pronounce it. Occult Luciferian perspective, so they do not believe in an actual devil as the Christians do. But God is the devil for them. They're one and the same. So yeah, I could talk about that forever, actually. But I don't necessarily agree with it. But I definitely understand that perspective. It goes hand in hand with a lot of rock and roll.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's sort of like the yin and yang of Eastern religion as well. It's I honestly, like, I'm not that schooled on it, so I don't know. I don't want to elaborate too much on my opinions of it, but I do think that if nothing else, it's super interesting that stuff sort of lies beneath and goes under the radar for a lot of people. As do some of the Lord of the Rings references. Like, if you are uninitiated, if you've never read up on any of that stuff, you would have no idea that he's talking about that. You just think he's talking about, whatever you decide it is.
We haven't brought that up yet. That's a good point. Big Tolkien fans, they reference Tolkien constantly.
Yeah, and not really too much on the first record. I think, like, as soon as Plant was able to bring in his writing on the second record is where we get a little bit of that.
So what's next?
Oh yeah, okay.
I could get into my book here.
Oh,
run on to the second album if you want.
Well, actually, let's do this first. Let's talk about the tour very quickly for the first record. Started the night after Christmas 1968 through February 69, and then they would go on to do European tours after that. But 3 U.S. and 4 European tours on this one album with different bands. Originally, they were on a Jeff Beck. Originally, a lot of these dates were a Jeff Beck canceled tour after he left the New Yardbirds, and then the management, of course, still had Page in tow. So they're like, okay, well, we'll just have this new thing do it, and they transferred over to these guys. So by the 10th date, I found this really interesting. By the 10th date on the tour, the headliners stopped showing up because they were being completely outshined by Led Zeppelin. So they literally stopped showing up to their contracted gigs because Led Zeppelin were doing so well.
Huh. Never knew that.
Yeah, and then if listeners want really nice, well-recorded examples of the band during this time, check out the BBC sessions, which are widely available and were released as an official album at some point. So totally worth watching on YouTube or listening to in your spare time, of course. Let's get into some stuff you brought, and I'll let you sort of intro it and sort of break down some stuff for us at your leisure here.
Sure, yeah. And I'll try not to take too long, because I could dwell and dive into this for hours upon hours. But I was very... Sorry?
We won't do it for hours, but I will jump in and ask you a question or two while you're breaking down some stuff. We actually have the leisure of however much time we want to take with this, so don't feel like you need to truncate or leave anything out. I want you to get all your stuff in.
All right. Sounds like a plan.
Cool.
All right. So, yeah, when I was real young, I forget how young, but, still a kid, like I said, Zeppelin was my first favorite band and obsession, really. I learned all the songs, and basically worshipped Led Zeppelin. And around that same time, I started to get into the occult. And actually, it was a friend of mine. I was a Christian. I grew up in the Church of Christ, which I prefer. I mean, I believe in Jesus, myself. But anyway, I grew up in the church. Went 3 days a week, and it was a friend of mine that said, "Oh, Led Zeppelin is satanic, right?" And I'm like, "What? It's my favorite band. How could that be? That doesn't match. Well, I can't have that." And that was really my stepping stone into the occult, into darker subjects, and that was, really took over. And so I got this book by Thomas W. Friend. It's called Fallen Angel, The Untold Story of Jimmy Page and Led Zeppelin. And I really related to it a lot because Friend, he also grew up with a religious background. Christian background, and we kind of had the same experience. We were both obsessed with Zeppelin, found out that they were into the occult, and we both went into the occult. And while I was reading it, it was reading about myself, basically. So yeah, that was kind of my stepping stone into that, and the Aleister Crowley, Silver Star, Thelema, however you want to say it, philosophies.
So while you're researching and finding out more about this stuff, are you putting any of it into practice? Are you merely, or are you only, I should say, doing it to increase your knowledge base about it?
A bit of both. Here's what I do, or what I did. For years, I would sort of test other philosophies and how they held up, or ways of life, and how they held up against Scripture, and what was the most beneficial for, your soul and for your well-being. And I would put, Scripture against, like, say, Buddha, or against Islam, or, against Satanism or Luciferianism, or, even different philosophers, in their lines of thought. And which ultimately, I do believe the Bible. But, but also, simply to learn about the practices. But I did practice some of it. Let's see, but let's back to Zeppelin.
Sure.
Their motivation and their drive behind their music is to subtly send invitations into the. What the hell are you doing? My dad's over here making all sorts of noises with a tackling box.
It's okay. I can barely hear it, so it's not going to affect anything.
Which, that's, Page's, like, prime motivation behind it all. He would never, mention it. He would deny it, on interviews and whatnot. And I'm sure you've heard that there are, satanic messages if you play certain Zeppelin songs backwards, which they're clearly there. He doesn't, he denies it, but, but which there are, messages if you play it forward too. So I'm not really sure why they need it both ways.
Yeah, I've never actually heard any examples of those, or like I've never dove down that rabbit hole. So maybe that'll be something I'll do here soon. What kind of stuff would it say, or is it incantations, or like is it even audible English, or what would you say? What would you classify it as?
You mean the messages forward or backwards? You're referring to the backward messages?
Yeah, the stuff that is supposedly in there, backwards.
Here, I'm going to see if I can't do this. I'll try and bring it up and play some for us. The one people like to reference, of course, is Stairway to Heaven. Here we go. Let's see.
I find it really interesting that he would deny it, even though he clearly embraced it in his personal life a lot. I don't know if that's like a public relations thing that he was advised to do, maybe, or it seems like he's pretty open-minded.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, because he was always from the get-go. He was always mysterious and. Kind of a quiet guy. Definitely one of my idols growing up, from guitar playing even into his personality and all of those things. But I would say the reason why he would deny such claims is because from his perspective, he really doesn't have anything to hide. Once again, if you're following the Luciferian perspective, you perceive that as light. You perceive that as a good thing. So he wouldn't have anything to hide.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, that's still a good question, though. Let's see. I'm going to try and bring this up for us.
Yeah, again, I like my former guest on the show, Brian Kennedy, is very into this sort of stuff, and he's actually currently writing a book on the occult that you'll probably be interested in. I don't know, honestly, that much about it, but I'll forward you a link whenever he's got it all finished up. But he has kind of clued me into this stuff over the years, and I never really, like, took a ton of... I don't know. I never really thought it was as solid of a thing as it actually is. Like, that Page was as serious about following these philosophies as he was. I thought it was more of like a rock and roll gimmick sort of thing, when actually it's really who he is. So.
Oh, he's serious. No, he's dead serious through and through. And of course, that's the greatest lie. The greatest lie is, the devil told the world that he didn't exist.
Right.
Which is the greatest irony within more extreme genres of music. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely into it. Which, I mean, I don't know. I'm torn because I can see both perspectives. Clearly the Luciferian perspective and the Christian perspective. But eventually, if you study both of them, one has to be lying. And one, because we're living in a society now where everybody's opinion is correct. You just have to see it from my from my view. But if you follow that subjectivity and lie of dualism far enough, eventually it'll lead you into madness, quite literally. Because everything's so questionable. You can question anything from that point of view. It's like, and then you begin to justify things that are completely unjustifiable. But I mean, that's me personally. But once again, I could go down that rabbit hole forever. But I do have this pulled up for us. It's Stairway to Heaven Backwards. You can find it on YouTube. It's for everybody, but I'll play a little bit.
Okay.
If you can hear it. I'm going to speed it up a little bit here. I'm going to skip to 321. So we're not going to listen to the whole song. So I'm not sure if you made any of that out or not, but definitely check into it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can hear it very clearly, but I can't make out what sort of messages they're claiming are put in there. But that's okay. I mean, obviously that stuff's all searchable, so I and the listeners can all do that. So it's very interesting either way. I mean, like, I think whether or not you think that or people would think it's nefarious or he's hypnotizing or he has some kind of purpose beyond just throwing it in there. I think it's interesting and it's kind of cool, like if you take your beliefs out of it and just look at it for what it is, him potentially putting in messages into his rock and roll music is a cool thing. You know what I mean? Like, just a base level.
Oh, sure. I mean, that's what, suckers a lot of people in, and that's the perspective of, it's, it's simply entertainment. But then you gotta, I'm not saying like Zeppelin per se, but like some more extreme artists, you gotta say, well, do I really, should I really be listening to, songs about raping and killing people? Is that is that good in the long run? I wouldn't say so, but I can definitely see where it's like as simple as entertainment, but I don't know, you got to draw a line somewhere with some of the bands out there, I would say, which usually they're just younger cats who are just looking for the shock rock value, which I get, but
oh yeah, absolutely. And that's certainly not what Zeppelin is trying to do. So I think that yeah, you're right though. You should be discerning about the stuff that you listen to and what their objectives are and all of that sort of stuff.
Let's see. little more to catch up on, but I guess we can move on, and if it comes to mind, I'll bring it back up.
Okay, cool, no problem. Well, that brings us to Led Zeppelin 2. Here's some facts about this one real quickly. Released October 1969, and then Halloween Day in the UK. So 2 different release dates again. Recorded while on tour in 2 studios in London, 5 studios in LA, 1 in Memphis, 4 in New York City, and 1 in Vancouver, described as a hut. So they are all over the place and just kind of like pulling stuff together where they can, which is a really interesting way to record a record, and definitely not how people do things today. Let's see. Eddie Kramer, director of engineering, mixing, said Page led the way. He says that 2 was a triumph despite conditions it was recorded in. That goes back to the Vancouver hut, probably. And he says it represents an evolution of their sound. And, they, of course, rehearsed a lot of these songs while they're on tour, probably during sound checks and stuff like that. Plant makes his first songwriting contributions with credits on nearly every song on 2. And we can check out the album cover. I have the vinyl here. Of course, you can't see me right now, but just trust that I'm looking at it. So we have the photo. Actually, the album cover was put together by a guy named David Juniper. The band said, come up with an interesting idea. So it's just a very wide perspective, vague idea. Just like, as long as it's interesting, we don't care. It's based on a World War I photo of a small division of German Air Force. And let's see, Zeppelin... The name Zeppelin is at the top with brown background that sort of gave the album its nickname, the Brown Bomber, which I had no idea was a thing before I did research for that. Did you ever hear that was a nickname for this album?
No, the Brown Bomber. It's new to me.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And then the version of vinyl I have of this is actually the gatefold, and on the inside gatefold we have, let's see, sort of a, gosh, it's so hard to describe. I guess like a Greek sort of very, very old style building, sort of like you would see in American capitals and that sort of thing, stone sort of tubular structures holding up a larger structure above it. It says Led Zeppelin across the top, and then there's a golden shining blimp across the top. It's very odd, but and it has the band members' names on across the bottom. But anyway, and of course the liner notes and everything are listed as well. But yeah, what do you think of the album cover itself? Do you have any opinion of it?
Not really, man. I mean, it's all right.
Yeah, no, I actually like the first album cover better. I should note that the band members themselves are interspliced with some of the German Air Force. So, anyway, we can move on. Okay, so an interesting sort of story behind the release of this record is that, okay, so there is an early mix by a guy named Rob Ludwig, who is listed in the liner notes. And his early mix is highly valued and sought after to this day for some weird reasons. So apparently on cheap record players, his version because it had such deep grooves on the vinyl, would skip on a lot of cheaper record players. And this is because the volume level was, and the grooves were deeper, so the volume level was would peak higher. So, for all of those reasons, it would skip on, and immediately it was recalled by the record company. Now, arguably, this is a better sounding record overall, and you can find this mix on YouTube, but obviously listening to stuff on YouTube, you don't get the high fidelity quality that you would otherwise. So it makes it worth a lot more, and it makes people that love listening to vinyl want that version way more than any other version.
Well, yeah, vinyls are the best for sure, but what do you prefer, tape or CD?
CD for sure, above tape. Tape,
Really?
yeah, like tape. I think tape, cassette tape in specific, deteriorates over time, whereas CD, the fidelity will stay. So,
Well, yeah.
I
I kind of
don't.
like tapes.
Yeah, I don't necessarily like all of the CD versions of some of the old albums that I love, though. Like, that very much has to do with the mastering and the person who's in charge of transferring it. If they don't nail it, then it's ruined forever, and then people just know it as the CD version and never really know that the vinyl sounded so completely differently, right?
Right, that's true.
Also, there's a lot of stories of Peter Grant fighting for the band to have their vinyls made earlier in the day at record plants because, generally speaking, the stories are that these record plants would make orchestral records earlier in the day, and the way they would make vinyl is they would dump it into these tanks that would get dirtier and dirtier over the course of the day of making records. So that would decrease the fidelity of the records they would make later in the day. So Peter Grant would physically go to the plant and make sure that the Zeppelin records would go in very first before any other record. So that also has a lot to do with some of these vinyls that date back to the very early days of when they were released being highly sought after and greatly valued by people that find them today. So if you can track down early versions, those are renowned as the best versions you can hear of this music.
I should note that Peter Grant, he was equally as involved in the occult practices as Page.
No way.
They were the two leaders. Yeah, definitely. If you look at The Song Remains the Same, the movie, you know, there's plenty of references to that in there if you look closely. The most standout one, of course, is John Paul Jones. Well, actually, no, John Paul Jones and Jimmy Page's like video, little segment in there. With John Paul Jones, it's him wearing a mask, riding home and greeting, you know, his family, and the little girl walks up to him and they're all celebrating and wearing masks and whatnot. And that's actually that represents a Sabbath of sorts. You know, they don't tell you this, but they're actually all there to sacrifice that little kid.
That's insane.
And then with Page, you know, in his segment there, you know, when he's climbing the mountain, you know, climbing to the light bearer, the old man, the hermit on the mountain, he's actually climbing towards, you know, the limitless, what is it? The limitless light of nothingness, which is, you know, the all-seeing eye and or Lucifer, whatever you want to call it. Or if you want to you know, relate it to other cultures, it's, or the planets, you know, it's the planet Venus or Aphrodite in Greek culture. But anyway, I'm going too far there.
Well, there you go with more.
Yeah, for sure.
There you go with more imagery use and underlying meanings that totally went way over my head.
Oh yeah, symbolism is key within the occult. You know, it's everything. But I digress.
I love getting even more tidbits of information about that. We'll have to reunite on the show and just dig into more of that stuff at a later date, I think.
Oh, yeah, for sure, man.
My buddy Brian would want to be in on that as well, so we'll have to set up a three-person thing, I think. Okay, so 2 went number 1 in the U.S. and the U.K. in 1970, and has been certified 12 times platinum in the as of 1999 in the U.S. alone. So there you go. I mean, this record was a monster hit. All right. So, Simon, let's get into Led Zeppelin 2 with the track breakdown. First song, album opener is Whole Lot of Love.
Willie Dixon again.
God damn it. You knew it was going to happen. And I'm looking
Dixon 2.
Looking forward. I think there's even more. So wonderful. Okay, so yeah, this song I of course love this song. If you are a Led Zeppelin fan, it would baffle me if you didn't. It's built around the Page riff. I kind of see it as a signature song of theirs. Middle section's very unique. This song is absolutely made for headphones as well, with a lot of movement between the two sides.
A lot of psychedelics in there.
Oh yeah, totally. And this song was a setlist staple forever, and it was actually the last song played live with Bonham. So, I feel like you gotta give this song credit where it's due. It opens up this record very strongly. What do you think about the song?
Oh, well, I mean, of course I love it. It's hard-hitting, excellent solo. Is it my favorite? I'm not too sure about that. But, I mean, it's an old Willie Dixon, and it was made popular by Muddy Waters, of course.
Right.
But it's definitely a good song. I don't know. I guess I've heard it so many times,
Yeah, that's the thing that I like. When you first brought up these covering these records, I went into listening to them thinking that I was going to have this attitude of like, oh my god, I've heard this song a million times. There's nothing left for me to find here. But of course, I'm wrong. Like when you revisit these records, you rediscover why you liked these songs in the first place. So, but yeah, I think you're right. It's probably not my favorite on this record. And if I was going to make a playlist for somebody of Zeppelin songs that they gotta hear, it would be on it. But if it's a playlist of stuff that I'm going to listen to, it probably would not make the cut.
Right.
The clip that I brought for people listening to the show is the middle section, and then going into the main riff of the song, which is sort of the signature riff. And here's that. Okay, so I guess we can move on to song 2.
Right.
What is and what should never be? What's your take on this one?
What stands out to me the most on this song is the bass, certainly. As soon as it kicks off, it's grooving. It's slower paced. And that's one thing that they always did well with the placement of their songs and their albums is you'd have a hard-hitting song followed by a softer song back to hard-hitting, and then you'd have a few ambient, like getting to the trance, getting to the zone sort of songs, and they always balanced that nicely. But yeah, What Is and What Should Never Be is it's a classic.
Oh yeah,
I'm not sure if it's favorites per se, but it's up there.
I would say you're 100% correct. This song is super dynamic, and it is a left turn from the first track for sure. You're just like, okay, we're going here now. Really laid back verse, but like you said, the groove is laid down by Bonham and John Paul Jones super well. John Paul Jones especially, like you said, stands out on this one. A real heavy chorus. Multiple layering of tracks really make this track shine a lot. I don't know. I love this song, and I would never skip it if it comes on. As I'm making my course through the day or through this record.
You can't skip this one, but the song that you can skip and should skip every time is Dire Maker. I know that you're a big fan of Houses of the Holy, but I fucking hate Dire Maker. It's like the worst song.
I mean,
you can skip the whole album of In Through the Outdoor too, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, In Through the Outdoor it would not be a choice. Like, it's in the lower fourth of records of theirs that I like. I think Dire Maker is certainly like, especially for that record, is weird. It's like a clunker. Like, I don't think that Led Zeppelin is infallible. I know, like, we are. I did mention on the first record, like, the blues stuff is not really for me. I think throughout, they have clunkers on every record they've put out, and that just is what it is. Like, they never put out.
Well, they have they have an oddball song or a couple per album. That's what they did. But I dig it because they wrote what they want to wrote.
One for me that it has always like stuck out is like I can't listen to this is The Crunge.
Oh yeah, that one's terrible too.
I can't do it, Simon. Like I understand they were into funk or whatever at the time, but I don't think they should play funk. It was a weird one. But yeah, the clip of What Is and What Should Never Be that I pulled is the last verse into the chorus into the bridge. So obviously I liked a lot of segments of this song. What I try to do with the clips is give a couple of different parts or like things that lead into other things so you could see sort of how they develop or transition into other things. Led Zeppelin were really good about that, moving from place to place within one song. So here's an example of that from What Is and What Should Never Be. Okay, so moving on to the Lemon song. This is one that actually I used to jam live with a little cover band I did for a couple years back in the day.
Rad.
Yeah, this is a Howlin' Wolf song based on Killing Floor. I think this song is a total highlight. I know we are saying that sort of a lot, but It can't not.
Right.
It can't.
Oh, this song's great. Oh,
Yeah.
this song's great.
It can't not be said though. These two albums are full of great songs, so that's what it is. It doesn't fit this one. While some of the other stuff they've taken or borrowed felt like covers, this one does not. It's very much their own thing. A great solo that I am going to insert at least part of it here for people to listen to. So here it is. And with that, at the very end of the song, I really like how they end it too. There's this like thump ending where you hear the kick drum hit, and then you hear on that note the guitarist Jimmy Page, of course, also hits a string or hits a chord, and it echoes out. And I absolutely love that ending. I feel like it is like a signature thing. That stands out big time. What are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, I used to jam it a lot as a kid. Usually what I would do is put on a whole record and simply solo over the whole thing, jam along with it. And this was a go-to for sure. I really enjoyed this one. It's one of my favorites off of this album, definitely, which, of course, who doesn't like The Wolf? You can't not like Howlin' Wolf. I guess you can, but you probably suck.
I think you just laid out a fact right there. And also, first guest of the show, Sean, he coined this term when we were doing our Pantera Great Southern Tranquil episode. The term is riff crumbs. And what riff crumbs are like these tiny little things on the end of a riff or the end of a song that sort of echo out at the end and you're left wanting more. That's what this song is to me. It has riff crumbs in it.
Riff crumbs, I like that.
Yep. Yeah, no, I very much along with what you said. When I marathoned both of these while I was having my daily 3-4 cups of coffee. That I wanted to go to.
I've had like 2 pots since we've been here.
That's awesome. More power to you, man. I just got up a little bit earlier than you, or else I would be drinking coffee right now too. When I was marathoning these 2 records before we started having our conversation, I wanted to go to my jam space and go jam all of these songs. So that may be on the agenda today. I don't really know what's going to happen after we get done.
Oh, I say do it to it.
So I guess we can move on to the last song on side A, which is Thank You.
Thank You. I would say that Thank You is the oddball out on this album. Usually have one, so I would say this is that.
Yeah, I would classify it as a ballad if they would do such a thing, right?
Yeah, I could see that.
I mean, for the record, it's a beautiful song. The Hammond organ really shines in this one, again played by John Paul Jones. and of course we get a lot of 12-string guitar in this one as well. What do you think about Page's sort of? I think he chooses to use the 12-string a lot, right?
Yeah, he's a big fan of it. He pulls it out frequently. But they always wanted to. They had a nice balance of bringing instruments in that were unique, but still not diverting from the from the rock and roll path. They balanced it nicely. They got folky in some tracks. They got bluesy in others, but it was still. And I think that's why they're still called like the greatest rock and roll band of all time, is because they were able to, bring in whatever the hell they wanted, but still keep it Zeppelin. I think they went a little too far sometimes, like say Dire Maker, for example. I mean, that song's pretty fucking weak.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, that's the real trick of it, isn't it? Is like making music that is essentially you. So, that's kind of hard to do. And I know we're harping on this a lot, but when you borrow so much material, it's like, how can you be your own? But apparently they do. They pull it off a lot. I think they have a good batting average for that, at least.
Yeah.
Okay, so unless you I should say the clip that I pulled for this is the sort of opening couple of things that they do in the song, and it really sets the table nicely for the rest of the song. So let's hear those.
Sun refused to shine, I would still be loving you. When mountains crumble to the sea, there will still be you and me.
Okay, you ready to move to side 2?
Best song on the album.
Ooh, that's a hot take.
Yeah, Heartbreaker.
We'll elaborate a little bit on that.
I think it's perfect. Like the pause right before the solo in the middle. I almost feel like this song should be on the first album, actually, but they're both similar. This one's I would say a tad bit more unique in some elements, but yeah, Heartbreaker is definitely my favorite. It's the heaviest by far, in my opinion. But yeah.
Certainly, I think like all of the elements in this song come together perfectly. Because the riff is maybe the best riff on the album. It's super iconic. I know I'm using that word a lot too, but yeah, the riff and the drums just are perfectly matched. And yeah, no, you're right. It's a perfect song especially for them. And I think on both of these records, they open up each side with a barn burner. Did you
say a barn burner?
Yeah. Sorry, that's a Southern term. I think I pick up terms from watching too much pro wrestling sometimes. So that's one of them. Yeah, no. I agree though. I think maybe the best moment is where they build into that guitar solo break, which you mentioned. Which interesting note, that guitar break was added in later. Like, I think he even recorded the solo at an entire different studio, and then they edited it in. And I'm pretty sure you can hear the edit. Like, there's a slight click, or not a click, but like you just hear where the sound sort of changes a little bit right before he kicks in. So that's something interesting to listen to, and I have pulled it, so here it is.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you had a clip of that.
Oh yeah, I come with clips for days on this thing.
He's the clip man. He's got every clip known to man. You want it? He's got it.
Well, one per song, I should say. Okay, here it is. So we move from that greatness into Living Loving Maid. What are your thoughts on this one?
Oh, I would say by today's standards, it's a bit misogynistic, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Lyric-wise, I'm surprised it's still on the air as much as it is. But aside from that, I mean, it's an all-right song. It's not one of my favorites. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a strong opinion on this song. I mean, it's not bad, but it's good, but it's not. I don't know. It's whatever, I guess.
Yeah, this one, I found out some interesting stuff about it, but I actually do like this song a lot. I just choose to not identify with the lyrics, of course. It's very odd. What's interesting, though, is the band never liked this song at all. They just did it as a filler song, pretty much.
Really? That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, no, it like, when you know that, it becomes very clear to you that it seems like they're just sort of mailing it in on this one and just doing part A, part B, part C, part A, part B, and we're done. You know, so like it's nothing special. And seeing that, I feel like it should have never made the album. They should have just left it off. So, but at the same time, like, it's okay. So, you know, whatever. It's a deep track anyway. But that's the thing, is like the whoever was in charge of making singles or putting stuff on the air, they chose that this one would be acceptable for public consumption. So it got played a lot. They never played it live, though, which is one of the only songs on these old records that they never played live. And, you know, compared to other material of theirs, like, I totally get why they wouldn't want to play this song.
Yeah, they're just like, fuck it.
And, you know, since there's not much more to say about it, I'll just play the clip. It's the verse into the chorus so people can get an idea of what we mean by, this is sort of Zeppelin by numbers, I guess is the best way to describe it.
So you better lay your money down.
Okay, so now we move on to sort of the home stretch of the record. We got 3 more songs. And Ramble On is the next song, and I feel like this is another one that's a total standout.
Oh, how could you not like Ramble On? And this gets into our Tolkien references.
Yes,
of
exactly.
course. Which Plant and Page were big Tolkien fans, which is a bit of an irony. And then actually, yeah, that's a really big irony, come to think of it, because, in a lot of black metal bands, Tolkien is huge, even though, Tolkien was a Christian through and through, and there are Christian messages riddled, within all of his writings. It's ironic, really. But, yeah, I mean, who doesn't like Ramble On? It's a classic. It's a unique song, but still hard-hitting, sort of like we mentioned with on the first album, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. It's got a similar parallel there, I suppose.
Yeah, actually,
it's one of favorites.
Going back to what you said about Tolkien, I actually had no idea that he was a devout Christian, and that and he put that stuff in. I do know, however, being a reader myself, that at the beginning of those novels, he always put that this material was not allegorical in any way, and that a lot of people thought that those books, the Lord of the Rings books, were allegories to World War II and Hitler and that sort of thing. So it's very interesting to me that you say he was a devout Christian, because that totally went under the radar for me.
Yeah, well, he also had a lot of, influences from his time within the war, as you mentioned. He made a lot of parallels there, especially.
It's it's interesting to me, though, that he said, no, these are not parallels. So, I don't know. It's an odd thing for him to do that. I feel like if he's going to be kind of clearly writing alongside subjects that he personally experienced, like, you would think he would just own it. But maybe that's just the generation he came from. He wanted it to delineate from that, right?
Yeah. I mean, his own family members have said the opposite, but I don't know. Who knows?
It's very interesting. Yeah, but back to this song. I feel like Page's guitar snippets add a lot to this song, and the drumming is really cool. Totally different than anything on either of these records that we've been talking about today. They never played this with Bonham, and they didn't play it. I don't think they played it live until that 2007 show, which is insane to me because it's so well known and beloved by us fans. Like, you wouldn't think that would be the case, but apparently it is.
I was unaware of that.
And I should say, like, if people are fans of Zeppelin but didn't take the time to watch that 2007 show, I absolutely love it. I feel like Plant pulled it off, even though he doesn't quite sing in the same register anymore. Lindsay says because he's super old. That is, in fact, the case. So,
give the man a break.
Yeah, I totally give him a break. Look, they did the songs as well as they could, and I feel like the concert is like a dream come true. So, do you have any further thoughts on Ramble On before we play the clip?
Play the clip, man.
All right, it is Jimmy's overdubs on guitar into the chorus. Okay, there's that, and let's move on to Moby Dick, shall we? What
This
are
has to be one
your...
of your favorites, I'm assuming.
Well, yeah, you would think so.
But you would be wrong.
You might be wrong. I'm sort of split on it, honestly. I do like it, and I like seeing him. I like hearing him do his thing. I like watching him do his thing on all those live recordings that they have. I think he's amazing, clearly. But I feel like putting a drum solo song is an odd choice on a record. What do you have any opinion on that?
I think it goes on for too long, honestly.
Yeah, even
I get a
the
bit bored.
recorded album version seems like a little bit much.
I mean, it's a cool song, definitely a catchy riff, but I usually skip it.
See, and the riff that bookends the song, like, that's what makes it work. If it was just Bonham, it would be even more out of the choice to put on the record. But like, you have to view it through the lens of the time. Like, in that time, every show, and even many years after this, I don't remember when the cutoff kind of was, or when people moved away from it. But every rock and roll band had a drum solo at their show. It was a part of like every set for years and years and years. And eventually it moved away from it, and I don't really know what that was about, why that ended up happening, but yeah, and Zeppelin were no exception. He did a drum solo, and they had a guitar solo, and yeah, it was a thing that always happened. So if you view it through that
Hey,
lens...
is Bonham one of your favorite drummers? Like, who are your favorite drummers? Like, you never mentioned that.
Let's see. Well, Bonham is certainly one of them. He's up there. Neil from Rush, of course. Moving towards sort of later years, or more recently, Mike Portnoy from Dream Theater's a big one. Gosh, I mean, that's a good question. I don't know. I could probably list a bunch of... I really was a big Pantera fan growing up, so Vinny is often... he's a sort of one that would seem like an odd choice, but if you're a metal fan, it makes total sense. Yeah, I don't know. That's another thing that I would really have to... we could go on that subject for a long time, but obviously John Bonham is a standout, and like a lot of metal and hard rock drumming comes from his influence specifically. So, Keith Moon, of course, you got to mention him. And then more on the technical side, you have the guy from Yes, the guy from King Crimson. All of Zappa's drummers were fantastic, of course. You could
Rush.
go on. Yeah, Neil from Rush you could go on forever.
Neil Peart, yeah.
But so actually, who are some of your favorite drummers?
Ooh.
Or bands for drumming?
Favorite drummers, huh? I don't know. I guess I haven't really thought about it because I'm a guitarist, so I usually focus on the guitar players. But
That's fair,
know,
though.
there are plenty of death metal and black metal bands which I love the drumming on. But I guess when it comes to rock and roll, um, Zeppelin, of course, Black Sabbath, um, Rush, of course. I don't know, man. I guess because I'm not a drummer, I don't really focus on it all that much. I mean, if the song has a decent beat and rhythm to it, that's usually all I care about. I'm usually more so focused on guitar work and composition as a whole compared to individual drummers. Gene Hoglan, or is it Hoglan or Hoagland of Death? Later albums.
Yeah, I think it's Hoagland. Yeah, he's amazing. Yeah, and you mentioned Bill Ward. Obviously, he's great. And then later years, you had Appice on drums with Sabbath, and they did some great stuff. And then other ones that came to my mind as you were talking is Santana's drummer and drummers were always great. Percussionists in that band, I mean, they made something completely unique. And then
who drums for Nile?
I don't.
Do you know his name?
I don't know, but he's like a machine. Death metal drumming is a thing that I can't quite grasp. Like I've that level of playing is beyond me, honestly.
Is it George? Yeah, George Colias, I think. They had a few drummers.
That sounds right. Well, we should probably, I don't know. Suffice to say, Moby Dick, yes, of course it's great, but like, it's only great because of the bookended guitar riff that's very catchy, and maybe in our collective opinion between you and I, it goes on a little bit long. Especially live, like he went on and on and on. It's like, okay, we could be spending this time playing more songs. And that's generally how I feel about drum soloing in general. Is like, I like hearing songs more than I like hearing soloing.
Agreed. Oh, one more. The drummer of Megwa. I have no idea how to pronounce that cat's name, but yeah, he's another.
What band is that again?
Megwa, the Polish band.
Okay.
Polish black metal band. Like thinking man's black metal, they say.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like the new trend. You got to be misanthropic and put a hood on.
Yeah, I actually saw a black metal band. Oh God, there's no way I could remember their name off the top of my head. It was something insane, but like, they're all in hoods and dark half face covering masks. So.
Was it Wada or Guada, however you say that name?
No. The name is too hard to pronounce. Like, there's no way I'd be able to remember it off the top of my head. Okay, so let's move on, shall we, to the album closer. Bring It On Home. Fittingly enough, the title is the album closer. And what do you think about this Willie Dixon cover?
Once again, I think you and I may be on the same page here, where it's at this point like it's a bit too bluesy, which I love the blues. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like they could have picked a more rockin' ending for this album. But I mean, it's cool. It's definitely a great song, but it's not one of my favorites.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same page. It has elements that I do like, though. There's They did it. Yeah, they arranged it with the faster middle section, which totally helps it and makes it more theirs. I don't like it until that section kicks in. But that riff is pretty strong. So, for a song that's like mostly traditional blues, and they end it with the traditional blues segment. It does have dynamics, so there's something sort of for
the middle half of the song is the best. The
That was
That's
some,
a good one.
that was a good mouth riffing
That's-
there.
Yeah, that's the official mouth referencing of the riff.
Yeah, that it's not as good of a album opener as from the first album, but it's still okay.
Well, what do you say, man? Want to get the hell out of here?
Yeah, let's. I got one more thing I want to do, and then we will wrap it up. The tours for 2 are 3 U.S. and 2. Here's the order that they went in, and they kind of mixed these up. But 3 U.S. tours, 2 UK tours, 2 European tours. Some of the shows were 4 hours long, even with only 2 records to draw from. Of course, they did a bunch of covers that I don't have written down here. And, you could see a lot of this material in the DVD set that we mentioned earlier from 2003. And the 2007 set had a lot of songs from 1 and 2, so that's certainly worth checking out. And that is all I had on the end of this. Is there... I forgot to ask you this before we started, but do you have any sort of like projects or anything that you have in the works or stuff that you are working on that you want to plug on here?
Oh, no, sir. No, nothing at this time. I mean, I am working with a couple buddies on like solo stuff. We've very slowly been working on it for past couple of years. Nothing has came into fruition yet, but
well, when it does, I will certainly pass stuff along to our listeners who may have heard this episode. And actually, if you have
I would
any,
like to get a.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was saying personally, I'd like to get a like rock, like psych rock, early '70s style band going. Because I've always played metal, whether it be death or what have you, So I'd rather change it up a bit myself if if you know anybody, shit, we could do that if you had time.
What I was going to say is if you're ever in town on the weekends, or you foresee being back here long term around the St. Louis area, we can jam, dude. I got a jam room, so I'm totally down for that. And we can see where actually I remember us sort of like when I was on the search for a new band, we almost got there. we had a group text going. We were trying to line up schedules and stuff, and it just never ended up happening. But
it's the hardest part, always is.
I know, man, and especially and I sometimes get into my work schedule talk on the show, which could go on forever. But like, I work overnight, so that makes it even more difficult and makes weekends literally the only time that I can make shit happen. So, when people, most musician types are working in industry jobs, like at bars and stuff like that, so they are the exact opposite of me schedule wise. So I don't know, it makes it difficult, but all that to say, if you ever want to get together and we can make it work out, then I'm certainly down for that. I love all of this sort of stuff that we've been talking about, psychedelic, bluesy sort of stuff. Like, you can just get in there with 2-3 riffs and go and make shit happen. So that's always awesome.
Yeah, I'd love to if we ever have time, for sure.
Well, we'll revisit that plan in the very near future, I hope. And I want to take this opportunity to thank you for making so much time on your Saturday to join me this morning and really dive into and dissect these records. I feel like we did a pretty extensive job of doing so, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. And thank you for having me. I sure do appreciate it.
Yeah, totally. And tell whoever, I don't know if it's you or if it's one of your family members making stuff in the microwave or the stove, that I hope they enjoy their meal.
It's my sister. Will do.
That's awesome. Because it's not distracting at all. I just heard it and wanted to make it funny at the end of this. So there you go. Thank you again, and if you ever want to come on again, you're certainly welcome. If you ever go to a show you want to talk about on the show, you're obviously welcome to come back on. We could Skype or we can meet up in person or whatever.
Sounds great, brother. Let's do it.
All right, man. Have a good Saturday. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Peace.
Later.